What is going on? I want to welcome you from half court for today. I am Sean Murphy alongside Crunch Time's own, the Italian stallion, that beautiful bastard, Jeff Iafrady. Jeff, it's so good to see you, my friend. Happy training camp season. Happy beginning of football. How are you doing with everything? It's a crazy time of year, but it has to feel like the first day of school. First full season at Crunch Time, too. That's exciting.
Yeah, no, I'm fired up. Even though I love the summer, I do. I also love the fall. So, and for obvious reasons. So we're getting closer to training camp. I mean, Team USA is playing, but I can't wait for talking. Not even just talking, because we talk off season, we talk ball all year, but reacting and discussing actual games. That's what I'm excited for. So I'm fired up. I can't wait.
Yep, exactly. And now you even get to actually like hear buzz about how players are playing in camp. And then eventually you won't just have to be like, oh, well, he's tearing it up in the practice field, according to a reporter. Like you'll actually be like, he has this many yards. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I'm excited, man. It's
I
going to
need
be
to
a
see it
great.
with my eyeballs. That's what I can't.
Exactly. And I'm going to be watching a lot of football with my eyeballs this season, man. I'm excited. It's going to be great. Speaking of great and things that I watch a lot with my eyeballs, Troy, how are you, my friend? It's good to see you. Always a pleasure to see the Polish beautiful man from Indiana. I almost called you by your Instagram burner account, then quickly remembered I should probably not do that.
Probably
Now I
not,
want to know the
Sean, but
burner
I'm
account.
doing well. Doing great. I was thinking earlier, kind of on the topic that you and Jeff were talking about. I miss those Sunday evenings when there was a good league pass game on and a good Sunday night football game on a Sunday evening. That's a great time. We're one day closer to that type of Sunday, and good NFL, good NBA going on. But now here we don't have either one, so we have to talk about both to make time go by. So looking forward to having some good conversations with you, Sean.
Yeah, 100%. And by the way, now that it's official too, we're going to be having after this upcoming season, even after Sunday night football ends on NBC, will be after football night in America. We're going to be having basketball night in America. I'm not sure if you guys saw all the news and the buzz around Amazon, NBC, and ESPN making their deal. TNT tried to come in and make a bid at the last second. They're actually now suing the NBA uh, because of the fact that they're claiming that they matched the same terms as Amazon, but the NBA saying that is not true. Yeah, and guys, we've been talking about this for months. I feel like ever since a lot of this stuff started to come down, Warner Brothers screwed this up the second David Zaslav came out and said we don't need the NBA because once he said that, that gave them an out to look at what was out there. And are you telling me if you're Adam Silver and you're faced with the option of, all right, you're going to get about the same, if not a little bit more money from Amazon. On top of that, everybody and their mother has a Prime subscription, not just in America, but around the globe. So you get to globalize the game even more, or you get to continue to be on cable, a dying platform that I don't know anyone in my life who has a cable subscription anymore. It's all streaming at this point. I like, in what world would the TNT option be the better choice? Especially after you said you don't need them.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, they lost this months ago, as far as I'm concerned. This is just making it official.
Yeah, I'm with you on the cable subscription. I don't watch cable anymore. I have all streaming services. So it's the way I watch sports, and I think Amazon is becoming a competitor of everybody right now. I mean, TNT. What I will miss, in the obvious part of this, is the programming that comes with it. But the actual company itself, this is you say something like that, it's the NBA, and Amazon is going to be willing to pay. So will a lot of other streaming services. So it's not the NBA's loss, it's the Warner Brothers loss. So I mean, good for the NBA for getting this done, but I'm sad we won't be able to see the fellas. That's what I'm very upset about. Not about the change of where they're because Amazon Prime. I have Amazon Prime, so I'm not missing anything. But
Yep.
not having to watch Shaq and Chuck go at it, that's a whole nother thing I got to cope with.
Yep. Now, what I will say though, Jeff, is I wouldn't reach that conclusion so quickly because if there is any company out there that has unlimited money that could just throw out to an elite broadcast team to
That would be the
come in
team.
and just take over their coverage, it would be Amazon.
Mhm.
Also, just saying, ESPN has been trying to recreate Inside the NBA for years on their network. What if they could just straight up bring in Charles Barkley or
Right.
Shaquille O'Neal or Kenny? Like those guys are still going to have value. So I don't think we're going to go without them in the basketball world. But I mean, Troy, obviously, if this is indeed the last time we see this group together, I mean, other than this pairing, I don't think there's a better group of chemistry out there.
Right.
Obviously, no,
Absolutely.
they're the goats.
Yeah.
They are the legitimate goats.
Certainly would be a sad end of the era. Certainly not even before those guys were on TNT. TNT just had, they really played a lot of NBA games. When I was starting to watch NBA games in the 2008, 2009, LeBron Kobe era, peak LeBron, or not quite peak LeBron yet, but peak Kobe for sure. And LeBron certainly a rising star in the league. Those were fun years, and TNT certainly did a good job broadcasting those games. But like you said, there's so many other outside factors that expands the game even more. And even we were talking beforehand, Sean, of yes, you mentioned people around the world have Amazon, but also the NBA can get more popular. Not just the NBA, but the game of basketball can get more popular through players, young boys, young girls falling in love with the game, but also the resources of coaching too, and that development, as you mentioned. So, there's a lot there that we can be excited for as NBA fans. Certainly, again, going to miss that era of TNT, but I care about the league and the game a lot more than just TNT's coverage of it. So, certainly excited to the next chapter. And I think that's the best way to look at this, as a next chapter in the league. So,
Yeah, really, it's at the end of the day, we're still gonna get, the sports we love about and, the storylines we're invested in. It's really just a matter of who's gonna deliver it, right? And so, the business stuff, big picture, there's a lot of interesting things there, but just for the sake of a basketball fan, if anything, I just think this will make more people be able to tune in, and I think more people will tune in turn because of the fact that, I think the the NFL numbers with Amazon Prime, Thursday Night
big
Football,
time,
those have
big
been
time.
some of the worst football games I've ever seen in my entire life, but the amount of people that watch them is actually insane.
Well, this is why you can't take too much stock into people saying, "Oh, I'm not getting a subscription." Oh, no way. They'll put that on social media. Oh, no way. I'm getting Amazon Prime to watch. This is when the NFL was making that transition and getting on different streaming services like Thursday Night Football, Amazon Prime. You know how many people I know that got Amazon Prime that didn't have it just to watch those games, even though the games were disgusting. But
Yep.
regardless,
Well,
they
even
still were getting Amazon Prime. I know some just for that. So
yep,
it's not going to change, especially if the game is as great as the NFL. Now, the NBA, I think, is still great, but the NFL is king for obvious reasons. But yeah,
right.
people, it doesn't matter what streaming platform you're on. If it's a great product, people will flock to it.
Well, even I remember when the Kansas City Chiefs, they had their wild card game on exclusively on Peacock. It was the first playoff game
Mhm.
ever exclusive on Peacock, and I believe it broke the record for the most streamed sporting event ever. Like as far as like streaming's concerned, like people are like, "Oh, this is ridiculous," but like you said, they will flock to wherever that is, where they can get the product. But nonetheless, speaking of that, guys, a team that people will be flocking to see is perhaps the most improved team in the league, the Detroit Pistons. At least that's according to what you could be seeing from the over under numbers in Las Vegas. The current over under for the Pistons win total this season is at 24.5. That would put them not only under 60 losses, but also over 20 wins for the first time in a couple of years. It would be a double digit win improvement as well. And I think for the veteran group that they've brought in to surround this cast, I think that's certainly possible. Jeff, if you were on insert name of betting app that's not paying us here, would you bet the over or under? And in your opinion, what are the things that are going to ultimately decide that, in your opinion?
I cannot believe I have to. I got to contemplate taking the over under at 24.5. But this is where we are. And
Mhm.
honestly, there's a handful of teams that didn't even clear that number last year. Teams that I would argue had a couple more pieces. I think the Raptors last year just hit 25, and I could be mistaken, but they had a better roster. So when I look at it like that, uh, I would say the over should hit. I don't think it'll be. I think it'll be by one. Maybe they get 25, 26 wins. There should be obvious improvement. I mean, you're asking for 11 more wins that they had this year. I think that's doable given they added some veterans that I think not only are veterans, but they're productive players. I think Tobias Harris is a starter. You could argue Tim Hardaway Jr., despite the how it ended with the Mavericks, he's still capable. Malik Beasley capable, guys that can shoot the ball that'll help complement Cade Cunningham. And if you're going to ask me what's a big reason they're going to do that, to me the answer is Cade Cunningham. I will go back to him again. I think you gotta look at your best player. Obviously, guys like Jaden, what kind of jump does Asar take, so on and so forth. Can Jalen Duren be the defender we all think he can be? There's a lot of factors. I think the young players taking a step will obviously help. But if Cade's playing at an all-star, and he put up all-star numbers this year. They just didn't win any games. But if he puts up all-star borderline star numbers, superstar numbers, then you're talking about a 10 to 15 win jump just because of that. And I think with JB, there is going to be times during the season where it is a new head coach, a new system, new voice, where there's going to be some setbacks. But I think by the end of the season, they have enough to win 25 games. I'm not. I'm not super confident, but if you're asking me over or under, Sean, I'm going to lean over, but by a win or two, not by a lot.
Listen, if there's any team that's earned your skepticism over the last few years, it is the Detroit Pistons. So don't feel bad about having to dance around with having to smash that over, especially when you start talking a little bit more of if you are making a financial commitment, what
Yeah.
would you say? It's
Don't
a
put the
whole
mortgage
different
money
ball
on it.
game.
Don't do it. Don't put
Yeah.
the mortgage money on
Yeah, exactly. Don't bet anything you can't lose. Troy,
it.
what about you, my friend? Would you be smashing that over? Would you be somberly hitting that under? And how much of a role do you think JB Bickerstaff and the coaching staff is going to play as far as them reaching that over? Because in my opinion, I know, the Cade Cunningham development is obviously, perhaps the biggest factor, but I think right up there, it could be having that energizing factor of a head coach who will actually be playing their best players on the court.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to take us down a journey a year ago when we were asking the same question, and I believe the over/under last season was 27. And I
Yep.
think we were all super, super, super excited of how
We
obvious this
talked about
was.
over 30. We were like, we were getting
Yeah,
we were
yeah.
getting
I think
real
we
excited.
thought 27 was an insult. But I'm with Jeff on it. I still think that you're going to probably want to take the over on it just because of the improvements we've seen with the roster, adding shooters on the team like Mikal Beasley and of course Tim Hardaway Jr. And another thing Jeff briefly touched on is I think a role that's going to be really important this year is Jalen Duren on the defensive end. Again, I think we've improved this team on the offensive end. Again, our stars, like you mentioned, Cade Cunningham is going to be such an important piece to this team. Again, shooters now that can, help him and compensate him on the offensive end. But I think Jalen Duren's defense, what are we gonna see out of him this year? What kind of leaps in year 3 now are we gonna see? And then of course, Asar Thompson, I think we kind of know what we're going to get out of him, which is exciting. But, what's his ceiling and his floor this season? I think we can certainly talk about that maybe another time, but that's going to be an important aspect of it. And to your main question there about, coaching staff and, JB running the show. Yeah, I do think when he is, going to be trying to view every game this season, all 82 games as a must-win game, and putting a roster out there that's competitive each and every night that can go and play, and it's going to be competitive on both sides of the court. And again, you're really going to be really probably have his mind in the right place during those last couple of minutes when it's a close game of lineup. Lineup's going to be he's going to be intentional. I think that was the word I was thinking of, intentional. He's going to be very intentional of the lineups that he puts out when it's a close game. So yeah, I think he's going to play a huge role. And I think it's going to be certainly a shift, a noticeable shift for us fans than last season with Monty Williams. So
Yeah, I think one thing that you could just tell about JB Bickerstaff, not only just from his, experience, just looking at him for the past, but also just even listening, to him talk during, press conferences, he's a lot more system oriented of a coach than, Monty Williams was. For all intents and purposes, Monty, a former player, someone who I think, kind of felt out the game a little bit more and made, tried to make adjustments maybe that way sometimes, was a little bit too stuck in his ways and the things that he did have in place. Whereas I think with like, a JB Bickerstaff, I think, there's an intentionality behind, player development, but also behind those rotations, knowing about the importance of staggering minutes and having that ability to adjust quickly, which is something that, I mean, Jeff, let's be honest, the Pistons did not have at the coaching position this last season.
No, they didn't. And I think what JB Bickerstaff will bring immediately will be accountability. I think that's something that I'm looking forward to. I love JB the leader. I'm just curious how offensively everything works. I think that was the biggest frustration with Monty Williams, although he came from Phoenix. I think we kind of underrate what CP3 meant to that team when he was there. So now having JB working with guards before, I am curious. I think this is a huge season, kind of a side storyline within the bigger picture, which is the win total. I think is Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham. I think those
Yep.
two, and how do they coexist? Does Ivy come off the bench? I don't know. What's the best route? Because same thing for JB, and we make this point a lot when we're talking Pistons, at least before the draft and during the draft. These are none of these guys, except for this past offseason with the draft and free agency, were Trajan Langdon's guys.
Mhm.
So, and same with JB Bickerstaff. I mean, he's coming in with basically a fresh canvas, and he's going to evaluate each of these players, and no one's guaranteed a spot. So, I like JB a lot. I think this season they're going to get, I don't want to say most, but you're going to see more success and in their own success, meaning, probably stretches of weeks where maybe they win more than they did in the beginning of the season. It's going to be late in the season. I think
Mhm.
as the season's ending, you'll start to see that progression. I I have a feeling, at least the beginning, there's probably going to be some sometimes maybe at the beginning, maybe towards Christmas, maybe a little before, we were thinking, oh gosh, this team is not good, and they start to pick up maybe after the All-Star break. I can see that
Mhm.
playing out as well.
Yeah, there's always those growing pains, and especially historically speaking, young teams struggle early, surge late. So,
Yep.
I think if something like that were to happen, I don't think that's going to be entirely surprising. I think something, and we've been talking about, this acquisition all summer as well. I wonder how early we're going to see the impact of having Fred Vincent in the building because, with that ability to, develop shooters and to, get that out of your young core and your supporting cast, we know that the shooting is going to be there from those veteran pieces. And that alone is going to raise the floor of this team immediately. But if you are talking about not only what's going to raise, like get this team on, to hit the over for
Mhm.
this season, but also to be in play-in competition to talk about, oh, this team's future actually looks legitimately terrifying for the rest of the league. That's going to be if they can get those guys to develop a consistent three-point shot. We already know Vincent's working with Asar Thompson every day. We know that he's going to be working with Ron Holland. We'd imagine he's working with Jaden Ivey and everyone else in the building. I'd imagine he's going to work with Kate Cunningham as well. So, if you can get those young supporting pieces, at least one or two of them, to become a, consistent, reliable shooter this season, that no question, in my opinion, would put them in position to hit the over. Because if you get an Asar Thompson, because we saw, towards the latter half of the season and, the limited action he had after the All-Star break, he was starting to get better with his corner three-point shooting. Once he was getting more of those opportunities, he wasn't swaying away from them. They were getting better. So once you actually get him alongside one of, if not the best shooting coach in the world, what can that look like? I'm pretty confident. And also, if Ron Holland can be a consistent contributor this season, that changes the equation as well.
Mhm.
Right, and I think Fred Vincent, you brought his name up. That was the core of what you just said. And I think in today's modern day NBA, that's just how you become competitive: is be able to shoot the ball, able to score the ball, able to take these leaps. We look at teams across the league. What's been their success? Developing in house and certainly having an offensive game that can compete against the other stars in the NBA on both East and West Coast. We've seen the same story in both conferences. So yeah, I'm just really excited to see, because we know what we have. We know the talent that we have. But certainly it's going to be interesting with this new voice in the locker room and new mechanics to see what we can, get shifted. So
Yeah,
Before,
real quick on Fred Vincent. I'm glad you brought him up because I think his impact, you're gonna see it. I don't know how early you're gonna see it, but Asar Thompson, to your point, probably has the most to gain because of the player he's already shown to be. As a
mhm.
defender, he is exceptional. And if he could develop, like you said, a consistent 3-point shot. I mean, we saw the Celtics, they won a championship, they had the talent, but man, defensively, that's what's key. You can have offensive talent, but at the end of the day, you have to be able to defend. And I think the Pistons, just in terms of what they have in personnel, they have guys, they have wings, they have length, they have, at least on paper, what they need defensively. Like, it looks nice right now. Like, okay, you have Duran, Sar, Ron Holland. I mean, even Cade, a tall, big point guard. Ivy's athletic, but they just either haven't shown the ability. I think especially Ivy with how much offensively he's been put on his shoulders. But other guys, man, if Ron Holland, Asar Thompson, Jaden Ivey, like you said, those guys can just develop any sort of consistent outside shot. Even like you brought up in the corner, I mean, guys have made a career just being consistent in the corner. Like, that's okay. And I think Asar can get to that. I don't know how quickly, but I hope it is this season because he looks promising. And Ron Holland, I think, will be the exact same way. And eventually you want those guys to start together. So ideally, they got to be able to at least shoot the ball anywhere from 35% at the minimum. I mean,
Yep.
ideally, you'd like that 35, 36, but we'll see.
Yeah, and mechanically, Troy, I would argue there's a lot there, to like from both Ron
oh yeah,
Holland and Asar Thompson's jump
absolutely,
shot,
absolutely.
and they also have a lot of other aspects of their game that already make them effective. So I think to Jeff's point, we might not see that effect in October or November, but in February or March, I think you'll start to slowly see. I think we'll start to see more posts on Twitter like Jaden Ivey shooting 40% from three this last month. Or like Asar
Yeah.
Thompson's gotten up to 37% from three. Like, I don't think those posts are out of the realm of possibility.
No, not at all. And I think the luxury you have with this, with especially guys like Asar Thompson and now Ron Holland, is, I mean, shooting the 3-point shot, that's been the biggest critique of them, right? That's been their biggest weakness. So to make those weaknesses slowly become strengths, I mean, we've seen throughout NBA history over time, when a player can do that, when they come, even a guy that it just came to my mind, Jason Kidd. Okay, Jason Kidd was a very poor 3-point shooter in college and coming into the league. And he took that part of his game, improved on it, and look at the career he had. So when we look at, even though different positions, different style of play, look at the capacity and the ceiling that a guy like Asar Thompson and Ron Holland have. Adding this to their game, it just makes them that much better of a player long term for
Yeah,
this
Yeah.
roster.
he,
So
he's working overtime. I mean, he's working overtime, Sean. And if he could fix Lonzo Ball, hey, I got confidence he can work with Asar Thompson. I do. Lonzo Ball's shot had to change
Yep.
each side of his head. At least Asar is already starting on the right side, so I'm
Yeah.
excited. But
He,
he's
yeah,
he's
he
gonna be
made
working a lot of
Lonzo
overtime.
Ball like not just fixed his 3-point shot, made him one of the best 3-point shooters in the association. Like, I don't think people realize how ridiculous that truly is, especially when his jump shot looked like he was legitimately like a glitched video game character where we were waiting for the patch to fix his jump shot at some point, but it just never that update never came. That's
Yeah,
pretty much what his jump shot was.
yeah, it was unique, and he fixed it,
Uh-huh.
and he became a 40% 3-point shooter. I mean, he even tweaked and helped out Brandon Ingram. Not that his shot was awful, but everyone needs a guy like Fred Vincent. Doesn't matter if you're shooting close to 40, just to have
Yep.
him in the building. Like, I think Cade could benefit a lot from him.
Mhm.
Everybody. So it's going to be interesting to see. But that was one of my favorite hires in a long time, at least on the
Yep.
coaching, at least on the coaching staff. I mean, he's one of the best, if not the best, shooting coach. So in the league. So
Yeah. When a
kudos to
guy
Cade.
has a definitive track record of producing and helping players succeed, and not just Lonzo, I mean multiple players, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, the exact type of guys that you need to develop into shooters in this league to succeed. Like the reason why the Pelicans are talked about as a dark horse championship contender is because of guys like Fred Vinson making that team dynamic and allowing those athletes to maximize their potential because of the defensive prowess they already brought. Now you can't be played off the court either because you can space the floor. Once Detroit has that, that's a whole different ball game, and that's what's going to really raise the level of the organization, in my opinion. The one last thing I think that will be an interesting X factor of all this is what they decide to do with the roster as the season goes on, because the Pistons still have cap space, guys. They're one of 3 teams remaining in the NBA that has cap space. They have $10.9 million available to their disposal. I'm not saying that they're going to sign anyone else. I'm not saying that they're going to make a trade. But of all the teams in the league, they're certainly well positioned to absorb salary or help distribute any moves, like, say, a Lauri Markkanen trade when he potentially gets on the move. Not saying that Detroit would go out and get Lauri Markkanen. I just don't think they're there. They don't have the assets. That's going to be like a Golden State move, in my opinion. But they'll need a third team. They'll need to offload salary. They'll need to give up good players in order to make that happen. The Pistons are in position to do those exact type of moves. And depending on how much they, because again, some of those veterans they got this offseason as well, they have value as well and could potentially be flipped for even more assets. So if they continue to build off this roster and they see if they like what they see and accelerate this a little bit, that could be a whole other thing as well. But I mean, the other thing is we just haven't seen a full season of Trajan Langdon at work yet.
Yeah,
Go
there's
ahead,
a
Trey.
lot there to unravel. And, you mentioned the salary cap situation and, the Pistons being in a good position there. Well, we can also talk about teams that maybe aren't in that luxurious position. And the great part about the collective bargaining agreement, right, is that it benefits markets like us more than some of the other, traditionally bigger name
It
teams.
evens the playing field for sure.
Right. Evens that playing field. So, I think for this season in the Pistons, I think long-term trajectory, we got to take advantage of that, right? We have to look at this as what it is, as a luxury. And again, we've seen over the past year and a half when this has really, come, and we've really seen how the long-term and short-term effects of the CBA. We've seen teams get desperate and have to move on from a player that they really like. I think of even Atlanta, not that he was a star, but like a John Collins kind of guy. And I know this was free agency, not a trade, but Denver last year when they won the championship, Bruce Brown had to get rid of him too. So, there is players like that who, they're not all stars, but they're certainly contributors that are worth at least bringing up into the conversation right here in July.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think this team is in a position to acquire any type of talent, as long as obviously the contract is expiring and or short term. Like there's a lot of guys I'm open to. I mean, I thought even getting assets in return for taking on that said contract. I mean, it's the way you do business right now. I know the NBA with how it's moving, with the first, second, with the apron being implemented, it's going to benefit teams that have homegrown talent and that can draft correctly. And the Pistons have got a collection of guys they've drafted that don't have to be paid. Obviously, Cade was just paid, but a lot of guys that don't have to be paid for a while. And then in the meantime, you take on contracts, collect assets. I mean, for a team that has been kind of starved of assets and draft capital. I mean, you just saw the New York Knicks give up a fortune for Mikal Bridges, who we've always made jokes would be like the perfect fit for the Pistons, but they are nowhere in line to be able to make a deal like that. So in the meantime, I think this approach is the correct approach. And you get a guy like Tim Hardaway Jr., who, yeah, he's expiring, but he can help these guys right now on and off the court. So whoever it is, like I know John Collins has been brought up before. I'm open to that. I don't hate that at all. I think John Collins is a fine player, and I think his contract is not even bad looking at it. So it depends. I mean, there'd have to be either too much money, too long of contract, or something to shy me away from it. But man, you get a year left on your contract. I don't really care who it is. If you could shoot, especially, welcome to Detroit. Come on over.
Yep. Yeah. Can you stay healthy? Can you
Yeah.
shoot the basketball? When can you get here? Like that's really the line of questioning there in all honesty. But I mean, obviously the moves they make, it's not all about this season. This
Right.
is, it's really more about setting the foundation for the years to come. But at the very least, the fact that you have someone in-house that understands, the big picture and how to utilize those resources to your advantage, those are the things that are going to position the Pistons for success, in my opinion. So I think it's a good. I think we've described it pretty well. And again, there's still so much time between now and even when training camp starts. We still have over a month until even we get into training camp. So you never know what can happen with the rest of the off season. Right now, everyone's on vacation, but eventually teams will come back, and eventually you'll see more moves made before the season starts. I don't know if the Pistons will, but I know league wide, I know there will be more moves, more moves made than that. But what's happening right now in the world of basketball, the thing that's taking over the basketball world and really the sports world as a whole is the Olympic Games. It's this new thing they started a couple of years ago. It's pretty small. Might get some following at some point. I hope success for them. No, but I mean obviously the Olympic Games is huge. The United States men's and women's teams both poised to win the gold yet again. I believe the women's Olympics team is going for their 8th consecutive gold medal in the Olympic Games, whereas the United States men's team is going, I believe, for their 4th in a row. So a lot of pressure and a lot on the line there. But what I would argue has been the most fascinating story of this Olympic team, but also just of the last few weeks as a whole, is really just Joel Embiid and just how bizarre of a situation this really has been over the last 2 weeks. Specifically, he really hasn't been that good. He's come out and, said a lot of really interesting things in podcast interviews over the last few weeks. Specifically, one of the things saying, if I was healthy, I'd be in the GOAT conversation right now, which I think is an interesting perspective. It's certainly, that's certainly a way to think about it. There's a lot more that he said, and for the sake of time and, for full transparency, the sake of interest, I just don't want to go seek it out there. To me, especially with how he's been playing in the FIBA rule set and how he's almost been a liability, if anything, and other players have gone out to, essentially outplay him on that team. I don't feel great about Philly's chances. And if anything, I feel a little more vindicated isn't the right word, but maybe more convinced than ever that Joel Embiid is not a championship level player. And I think we're watching that start to play out. And I think the seeds are being planted on perhaps the biggest stage in the world.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Joel Embiid, I've respected him in terms of his talent, but I think his personality, not a fan. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. I mean, he got booed because when they were playing in France for other reasons. He didn't play for France and all this other stuff. I think Joel Embiid's funny. Like there'll be times where I'll see a quote from him. I'll be like, "Oh, this guy's funny," but he's got to be frustrating to be, or it's got to be frustrating to be a fan of a team where Joel Embiid's your best player, and either A, he disappears in the postseason, or B, he's unable to stay healthy, and then he says things like he's been saying. Like it's a frustrating experience. It's entertaining from a different market, but Joel Embiid physically has all-time talent. He just does. Mentally, that's where it hasn't caught up to what he is physically. Like you look at the greats, and it's just not really like this. I don't know. Joel Embiid's a very unique individual. He's a troll at times, even though he's getting older in age. It seems like he's getting younger mentally. It's just weird, and I think at some point there has to be some sort of accountability from himself to look at all his actions and be like, yeah, maybe I could have handled this better, or maybe I shouldn't have said this. Especially being the best player, one of the best players in the world, a former MVP in a very passionate city in the Philadelphia 76ers. They look at him. I mean, he carries all the stress on his shoulders if they don't get it done. Even if they get Paul George, it's still going to fall on Joel Embiid. So even though I'm not a fan of his, he's just very unique, and it's got to be frustrating to be a 76ers fan and to have your best player just say some of the dumbest stuff, but be so talented at the same time. He's so good, but man, it's got to be frustrating.
Which, by the way, I found some of the quotes, and they really are fascinating. He had a New York Times interview where he was specifically asked about, a lot of things about his career, his past 10 years with the 76ers. And according to this interview, really what he's been asked is like, why he thinks he hasn't won a championship yet. And he said, I'm sure everyone asks questions if you care about the right things and you care about winning, and it hasn't happened, which I'm probably at fault too. But injuries, I don't perform at the level I should. I could take the easy way out and not play through injuries, but I'm just like, I'll play. So that's the thing. Yeah. So that's all my fault probably, because I haven't performed at times at the level I know I can and I know I should. But then again, if you want to win, the thing that I always talked about is stability and continuity. And it's like, I'm sorry, you're talking about continuity when you're asking Daryl Morey to shake up the roster like every week and a half. Like what are we talking about? Like you were the one that wanted, that wanted Ben Simmons out of the bed, which, I mean, listen, every right to do so. But then brought in James Harden, which, when you're talking about stability and continuity, is not what I think of when you describe James Harden. There's just a lot of things about Joel Embiid that are very hypocritical. A lot of things in this article that are very interesting, but that was the one that caught, like, if you want the microcosm of why this guy won't win, in my personal opinion, it's the lack of self-awareness.
Right. And you think too, especially when looking at a player like Joel Embiid, who's now 31 years old, you have to ask the question of, okay, when when is this guy's peak? And I just would have a hard time looking at any NBA fan that looks me in the eye and says his peak is next season or the season after. Right. I think a more logical thing to say was last season or the season before, uh, or even season before that. I just don't think that he is. I think his best days are behind him. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I don't think he's on a upward trajectory right now with his career and his play style. Which, if I'm a Sixers fan, or I'm a Sixers GM, I have to really take that into consideration. Of, okay, I can't necessarily build around him. Do I just wait until Tyrese Maxey's the guy you build around with? There's just a lot of questions that you have to be asking if you're a fan of this organization, as well as if you're working for this organization.
I think there's certain moments in time in players' careers all throughout sports, but, especially in basketball, where you can definitively point and say, this is the best this player will ever be. It will not get better than this. For example, like, to me, the biggest example I think of in basketball, LeBron James, Game 7, 2016 against Golden State, when they came back from the 3-1 lead. He got the block on Iguodala in transition, but on top of that, his level of play on both sides of the court, like, LeBron James was not getting better than that, right? We're like, that's just not humanly possible. That was peak LeBron.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the night we saw Joel Embiid peak as a basketball player was earlier this season, when he exploded and had that like 50 plus point game, and everyone was talking about how he was the MVP. He had when he scored 70 against San Antonio, I should say. In my opinion, that was the best Joel Embiid we're ever going to see. From here, especially when you talk about a guy who historically has not been healthy, and now you're a big over the age of 30, and you didn't even get to 40 games last year, and the most you've played in your career is 68 games. I just don't see how and even then, like he said, he's not the best version of himself come April, May, June. So like what even percent Joel Embiid are you going to get during that time?
Yeah, it never had the greatest diet either. I mean, look up what he's eating.
He doesn't look in shape right now.
I don't know if it's changed, but like you said, you're 7 foot. You're getting over the age of 30. Check his playoff numbers. He actually had a good playoffs this season, but in general, half the times he's made the playoffs, he's either underperformed or hasn't been healthy. So you don't know what you're getting come the postseason. His numbers go down in terms of his field goal percentage, his 3-point percentage, points per game, except for a couple years he's played well, but he's not dependable. And I think for how talented he is, you just mentioned some of the things he's done, winning an MVP, scoring all the points he scored and being as dominant, you're seeing flashes, but the longevity, that's why I tend to respect LeBron even more. I mean, it's hard to take care of your body and play at a peak level and not be injured closer to the age of 40. And we're talking about Joel Embiid. He's just turning 30. So especially at his size. So I get what you guys are saying. I think Joel is going to be still a really good player, but to your guys' point, the best of Joel, like, let's just see if he could stay on the court, and now you got playoff P, as some would say. So let's see if playoff P can help him out in the postseason.
Yep. We all know Paul George, a notoriously historically great playoff player. That's as yeah.
Self-proclaimed, by the way, playoff P. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Clippers faithful would tell you all about playoff P and all the successes and the fruits that trade has brought their franchise. Which, speaking of, you're talking about this survey I saw earlier today. It was from ESPN. Every year they do some form of survey where they essentially ask people throughout the league, anonymously, of course, what they thought of the moves made throughout the offseason. And in this year's survey, some of the questions, obviously the first question was who had the best offseason. And, the 76ers and the Knicks were the two top teams there. I don't think that's much of a surprise. They got the big fishes this offseason, so to speak. But the question that was particularly interesting to me was who had the NBA's worst offseason? And I had you guys guess the top 3 teams on this list earlier because I thought it was pretty interesting and I didn't think people would be able to guess it either. And I was pretty correct based off of us discussing it. But the results were the Denver Nuggets came in at number 1 with 6 votes, the Bulls at 2, the Clippers at 3, and then the Lakers, the Knicks, and the Pistons were all tied for a vote. I mean, I don't think the Pistons really belong in this conversation, but I can understand why people would want to, dog on them, so to speak. When you look at that top of the list, I don't know if I would say Denver had a worse offseason than the Clippers per se, but I mean, you talk about the team that Denver's returning versus the one they put out there this last year. They're definitely not nearly as strong of a contender as they were when they're not bringing back Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and you're putting out Russell Westbrook, which, with all due respect to Russell Westbrook, is not currently a Kentavious Caldwell-Pope player. Not at all.
No, he's
right. And you think of just the other moves that the Western Conference has made, and just the talent that's in the West right now. You think of the team that knocked them out in the second round, the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're going to be just as competitive and hungry for blood as well. You think of the Dallas Mavericks, the team that did get out of the West this past season. They're only going to be looking to improve and be back again in the finals. You look at Clippers. Okay, they lost, Paul George. We kind of understand, where they're at right now as an organization. Phoenix, again, got Tyus Jones, but hasn't really done a ton. Still has KD. Never count out KD.
Well, how about this? How about this? You think they're better in Oklahoma City after this
Bingo. There's
offseason?
another one. There's another one. And San Antonio is only getting better too. Uh,
Yep.
so,
Hmm.
yeah, right. Oklahoma City is probably their biggest fear going into this season of what we know that they can play this year, especially now getting Caruso on the defensive end. I mean, I think that helps that organization and that team so much this upcoming season, especially during the playoffs. So, yeah, I just, you get out in the second round and your roster gets worse. You know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, Jeff, is it was not like this was a team where things were looking, all downhill. Like this really came down to were the owners willing to flip the bill or not. And when you have an MVP caliber player and you take away that caliber of support around him, it is, in my opinion, a pretty short term thinking misstep and mistake to really, essentially give up another opportunity at a title. Not saying that they can't win, but that path is certainly a lot harder. And, you could make an argument this team could be playing bound. And when you talk about then having to be in a one game scenario, let's say they had to face a Victor Wembanyama in San Antonio in the play in tournament, Chris Paul and that, young scrappy team, and Denver's not hitting shots. And instead of having a guy like KCP you can rely on, you now have Christian Brown and other wing players who don't have that experience, don't have that cachet. Like, to me, those are the moments where you're really going to see the impact.
Yeah, and I think his loss is more significant than probably they even think, and I think they know. I mean, he was guarding the best perimeter player on the other team, and he could shoot, so that matters. And he was a hell of a defender. So Russell Westbrook, yeah, he's capable. I think Russ is a little underrated defensively, but offensively is where it's just it's not close because of his lack of a 3-point shot. I mean, KCP is a reliable catch and shoot guy, and you know how the Denver Nuggets want to play. They move the ball, and when KCP was open, he's knocking it down. Russell has a different play style. I think he can definitely share the ball, but there's times where Russell, maybe he's matured in his older years, but it's you don't really know what to expect sometimes. I can get why they would vote him as the worst offseason, but in the same breath, the Nuggets, in terms of what they have talent wise, I mean, you still have Jamal, you still have both wings that I think are supremely underrated. They
Yeah.
still have Jamal Murray and Jokic. So and they still have one of the best coaches I think in the NBA. So I don't think they're going to. I don't think they're going to take a significant step back. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they're in the semis, back battling to get in the conference finals. But yeah, I think KCP's his loss. I mean, I get it; it hurts, no doubt. It hurts. He's a guy that would help you take your team over the top. At least he's not a star caliber player, but his role is something that can help you take down, a team like the Celtics or so on and so forth. So I think his loss is significant, but Nuggets are still the Nuggets. I think they're going to be really good this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, they still absolutely deserve to be in the conversation. I will say Orlando, they got to feel pretty friggin' excited with the roster they have going
Mhm.
into this season, and I think KCP is going to be perfect for them. So I'm excited. Surprised that they weren't mentioned as having one of the best offseason because that's a pretty major victory. And the fact that they were even in discussions for being a Paul George team, good for Orlando, man. Like there was a day 5 years ago that would have seemed ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, just shows what happens when you put together some winning basketball. The worst move of the offseason was another pretty interesting one. This was actually a three-way tie, which was pretty interesting. Number 1 was Chicago's part in the DeMar DeRozan trade. Number 2 was Sacramento's part in the DeMar DeRozan trade. And then number 3 is Paul George signed by the 76ers. Now, I can understand, like the Paul George aspect of it. I think the 76ers had no choice. I think it's the best move they could have made to keep themselves relevant, try and build around what they had. At the same time, they also gave a 34-year-old max money for 4 years, fully guaranteed, who also has injury problems, to put alongside your historically injury prone, you know, problem that we just talked about a little bit ago, and essentially the modern day Wilt Chamberlain, both in the good and the bad, if we think about Wilt Chamberlain. So I think that list is pretty interesting. Do you guys have a personal pick of what your least favorite move was this offseason? I personally still think not even getting a pick for trading Alex Caruso and getting Josh Giddey. I like Josh Giddey. That's a terrible trade, man.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And not just that trade, the Chicago Bulls, but of course, the one we mentioned earlier with DeMar DeRozan, right? And I just think those back-to-back moves as an organization like Chicago, who, my goodness, tried to run it back last season after the season before, the 2022-2023 season. We're that one game away from the playoffs and the play-in tournament against Miami, who eventually went. So you look at where that team was, now is, and now moving forward where they're going to be, it just seems like that team, they would probably be my number one, probably worst offseason move, because it just seems like they don't really value their future. I mean, is that really like
Well,
a wise
I
thing
would
to
say
say?
I would say they're heading in the right direction. They're just not getting enough for what they're doing. Like
Right,
they're rebuilding, which is the right thing to do, but it's like we talk about with like what the Pistons need to do. Get more assets, put more
right.
things in the cupboard.
Not giving assets away so freely.
Well, and they traded DeMar DeRozan, and they didn't get anything pretty much in return.
Right.
Like you
Anything the Bulls do, it has to be considered the worst. I mean, it's at this point, it's like, and Zach LaVine still hasn't been dealt. Like there's so much confusion. I mean, the
the
DeMar DeRozan.
market on him is dire, by the way. It is
Mhm.
like it legitimately comes out like every other week. No team wants him. Oh, it's like no team wants him. The sky's blue. Like the two constants of where things are at right now. It is
Mhm.
the evolution of the Zach LaVine talk has been fascinating. So to see them massively fumble that to the level that they have, it's really been a marvel to watch. It's kind of something that you didn't know was really possible. So, kudos to them on that side of it, I suppose. The other two, the other two trades that were, or the other two moves that were pretty significant on this list. One of them we talked about at length. Denver losing Kentavious Caldwell Pope. I mean, that's just ownership being cheap. And, you know, I mean, we saw how much losing Kentavious Caldwell Pope for nothing hurt Detroit at points over the last few years. I have a feeling that's going to hurt the Nuggets. It also hurt the Lakers as well when they traded him for Russell Westbrook. The other move, Mikal Bridges traded to the Knicks. Now, I personally think this is one of the best moves of the offseason. And I understand people might look at it and how much they gave up for a player who's never been an all-star. But when you talk about the level of chemistry that those guys have, when you when you put together players who have won a title together on any level, especially at a high stakes level that was the NCAA tournament, these guys have won multiple titles together. Now you give them the opportunity to play together in the NBA. They're all if not all-star caliber, pretty damn close. And in my opinion, right away puts you in the best position to compete with Boston in the Eastern Conference. I think that's a win-win move.
Right.
So,
What do you have to lose if you're a New York organization?
right. Like, yes, you gave up a lot of assets, but I mean, Jeff, the Knicks, I mean, this is the first time they've been good in a long damn time. And you
Mhm.
have and you have a guy who wants to be there with other players who want him to be there, and he's only across the bridge. You make that happen every day of the week and twice on Sundays.
Yeah, agreed. And the Knicks, Knicks going all in this offseason. At least giving literally all in for Mikal Bridges. I think made it everything. It makes me want to pay attention to the Knicks even more. I'm
By
excited.
the way, isn't it still weird to compliment them? Like
Yeah,
I'm used to having fun at their expense. Now I'm like, the New York Knicks a well-run machine.
Building a team that they want to be able to match up with Boston. Clearly, Michael, OG. It's going to be interesting.
Mhm.
They traded what 4, 5 first-round picks? What exactly for Michael? It was, and I love
Yeah.
Mikal Bridges too.
Yeah.
And they get
I
the
think they
Villanova
traded
crew
like
back together.
4 picks and then like 1 or 2 pick swaps.
He's just a dream for any NBA team. I mean, we know what he can do on the defensive end. I mean, we saw even more so in Brooklyn, how he can score the ball. We saw little snippets of that in Phoenix, but my
Yep.
goodness, once he got to Brooklyn, he kind of became that Kevin Durant style, poor man's Kevin Durant for the Brooklyn. So it'll be really interesting to see again, like those guys, OG Anunoby, Jalen Brunson, how he pairs up with them.
And in Jalen Brunson wanting this to happen so badly that he was willing to sign a contract where he took less money, which is not a precedented thing for max level all-star caliber players to just say, "Hey, pay me less so that we can put more around the team." Like there's some Patrick Mahomes energy to Jalen Brunson, and there's a lot to like there and their overall future outlook. So I'm excited to see what happens there at the Knicks. I vehemently disagree putting them on the worst moves list. By the way, have you heard the theory of why the Knicks have suddenly gotten functional? It's like one of my favorite theories out
Let's
there.
hear it.
I'm not sure how much you guys know about James Dolan, but he's the owner of like the MSG group, right? And essentially, the MSG group also owns this pretty cool venue out in Las Vegas called the Sphere. And so essentially the theory is James Dolan is super into is super into music and live entertainment. In fact, he has his own band that he plays in, which side note, if you're ever bored and want to look up something really funny, go listen to his band. They're terrible. It's amazing. But they essentially the theory is he's been so wrapped up in the Sphere and with what's been going on with that development and with all the performances and stuff like that, he hasn't been around the team. He's been in Vegas or he's been engulfed in everything going on with MSG, and they've actually been able to like let them cook. So the theory is now that the Knicks are getting good again, James Dolan might be coming back around, going, "Hey, look at this, my Knicks, we're doing it." And he might want to get his hands on the wheels a little bit more now that things are getting good again. So hopefully that's not true, but that's one of the conspiracy theories out there of why the Knicks are actually competent now, because I mean, that's really the only logical explanation because if James Dolan's in the building, they're not doing smart things.
No, that's
So,
taxes in what you just said. Yep.
yeah. So if I'm a New York Knicks fan, I am investing everything that I can into the Las Vegas Sphere and making sure that thing is as fruitful as possible. Because if James Dolan just stays there, he might forget the Knicks exist. And so, if I'm Knicks fans, that's my pursuit to winning a championship is going to see as many washed up singers go play at the Las Vegas Sphere as possible. So there's your random end of the podcast conspiracy
I like
theory.
it.
I like it. I like it a
I,
lot. It's a great way to close, Sean.
I appreciate it. I thought it was pretty good, but nonetheless, thank you all. Thank you both for joining, and thank you all for listening and making From Half Court a regular part of your podcast rotation. If you're new here, be sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell. But also, be sure you go and follow my guys and what they're doing as well, especially my guy Jeff on Crunch Time Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Go catch the Lions, NFL, and sports coverage as a whole. Those guys are killing it. Also, check out Troy on X at TroySergey44. You can find me at Sean Half Court. But that's going to do it for today, folks. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you're subscribed.